The 7-year-old stood perfectly still in the doorway of the mansion's east wing, clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit, while her mother's voice drifted up from 3 floors below, discussing yet another specialist who hadn't helped. Trevor's hands paused on the mahogany banister he was restoring. The child hadn't made a sound since he arrived that morning, yet her eyes followed every movement of his tools with an intensity that tightened his chest. 7 years old, and not a single word spoken since birth. The housekeeper had said it softly, like it was something dangerous to say aloud. 7 years of silence, despite countless therapists and specialists her billionaire mother could easily afford. But when Trevor's 6-year-old son showed up after school and began sanding a small wooden horse he'd made from scrap wood, something shifted in the girl. Her posture changed. She took one cautious step forward, then another. What Trevor did next would challenge everything this family believed about silence, speech, and the fragile space between a mother's control and a child's voice. The Bradford estate rose like a symbol of old wealth on the hill above the harbor. Trevor had worked in construction and restoration for 15 years, but houses like this still made his jaw clench. Not because they intimidated him, but because he knew that beneath the flawless surfaces, pain lived just like anywhere else. Miranda, the head housekeeper, had walked him through the job list that first morning with crisp efficiency. Restore the mahogany staircase. Repair water-damaged crown molding. Refinish the library shelves. Straightforward work. What she hadn't mentioned was the child. Trevor had been working for about 2 hours when he felt it. That familiar prickle on the back of his neck that came from being watched. He turned slowly, and there she was. A small girl in a white dress, dark hair hanging past her shoulders, standing silently in the doorway. In her arms was a stuffed rabbit that had been loved nearly to ruin, one ear barely attached, the fur thin and worn from years of constant holding. Their eyes met. Trevor waited, instinctively, for her to say something. She didn't. She simply stared at him with an expression he recognized immediately, because he had seen it on his own son's face after the accident. It was the look of someone who had learned too young that the world could take away what mattered most. Trevor turned back to his work, but after a while, he began talking, not to her directly, just out loud. He explained what he was doing, why the wood needed time to dry, how you could tell good mahogany by the way it caught the light. She didn't answer, she didn't move, but she didn't leave. That evening, Miranda came to find him. "Mrs. Bradford would like to speak with you." Trevor followed her into an office that smelled of old books and expensive perfume. Carolyn Bradford sat behind a walnut desk, her blonde hair perfectly styled. She was younger than he had expected, early 40s maybe, with the kind of beauty that came from both genetics and careful maintenance. But there was something fragile around her eyes. "Mr. Hayes," she said without any introduction, "Miranda tells me my daughter spent the afternoon watching you work. Violet doesn't do that. She doesn't engage with anyone outside her therapists and Miranda. I need to understand what happened." Trevor shifted slightly. "Nothing happened, Mom. I worked. She watched. I didn't approach her or speak directly to her." Carolyn studied him closely. "Violet hasn't spoken since she was born. 7 years of specialists, therapists, interventions. There's nothing medically wrong. She simply chooses not to speak." The way she said chooses was heavy with meaning. "If she's interested in your work, I want you to continue. But do not try to make her talk. Don't push her." Trevor met her gaze and saw fear behind the control. "My son didn't talk for 8 months after his mother died," he said quietly. "Everyone had advice. Everyone wanted to fix him." He paused. What finally helped wasn't trying to force words. It was giving him something worth talking about. Carolyn's expression shifted. "And what was that?" "Building things. Wooden toys. After she died, he couldn't control much, but he could control what his hands made." The next morning, Violet was already waiting when Trevor arrived. Around mid-morning, Raymond's school called. There had been an incident. Could Trevor come pick him up? Miranda surprised him by saying, "Bring him here. Let him sit with you while you work." When they entered the east wing, Violet stood and carefully stepped toward them. Raymond noticed her immediately. He reached into his backpack and pulled out the rough wooden horse he'd been sanding. He held it out. Violet took it, turned it over in her hands, looked at Raymond, and nodded once. Then she sat down, the horse in one hand and the rabbit in the other, watching as Trevor showed Raymond how to smooth rough edges with sandpaper. Over the next week, a routine formed. Trevor arrived to find Violet waiting. Raymond came after school. The three of them settled into a quiet rhythm. Trevor brought scrap wood. Violet listened closely when he talked about patience and precision. On the sixth day, Trevor brought an unfinished wooden box. He showed Raymond how the corners fit together, then left the pieces near Violet. 20 minutes later, Violet had arranged them perfectly. Raymond beamed. "You did it right." Violet's lips lifted, not quite a smile, but close. That night, Carolyn appeared and stared at the pieces. "She's never done anything like this." Trevor wiped sawdust from his hands. "She watches. She learns quietly." Carolyn hesitated. "The specialists say I should limit her exposure to unqualified people who might reinforce her mutism." Trevor thought of all the experts who had tried to fix Raymond. "Your daughter doesn't need fixing. She needs space." Carolyn's eyes filled. "Continue your work. If Violet wants to watch, that's acceptable." The following Monday, the East Wing was empty. Miranda explained that Violet wouldn't be coming anymore. A specialist had tried to take the rabbit. Violet had panicked. Now she wouldn't leave her room. Trevor worked in the library instead, talking as he worked. He spoke about his son, about his wife, about how silence wasn't absence. After an hour, he heard movement. Violet appeared in the doorway. He set down sandpaper and wood nearby. Slowly, she began sanding. They worked in shared silence. When Miranda saw Violet on the floor sanding wood, hope filled her eyes. The next morning, Carolyn confronted Trevor. He listened as she spoke about grief, fear, guilt. He told her about Raymond. She told him about Violet's father, about the accident, about the specialist who tried to take the rabbit. "You didn't fail her," Trevor said. "You're protecting her the only way you know how." He suggested she sit with Violet. Sand wood. Just be present. That afternoon, Carolyn knelt beside Raymond as Trevor guided her hands. She applied stain too heavily at first. Lighter, Trevor said. "The wood takes what it needs." Violet and Raymond played with a wooden car. No words, just understanding. Over the next weeks, Carolyn showed up every day. She learned. She tried. Violet watched her mother change. One afternoon, Violet struggled with a wooden box corner and held it out. Trevor helped. It clicked into place. Violet nodded. Raymond smiled. "You're doing it." Violet smiled fully for the first time. Later, she tried to speak. No sound came out, but she tried. That was enough. They began spending Saturdays together. As friends, they built a bookshelf. Violet took her mother's hand. Carolyn held it like it was made of glass. Miranda left. Carolyn stayed. "What if Violet never speaks?" "Then you love her anyway," Trevor said. They built more projects. Violet hummed while she worked. One summer day, Raymond asked why she didn't talk. Violet drew instead. Raymond understood. He told her his story. Violet cried. Then she whispered, scared. Her first word in 7 years. Carolyn held her. Raymond hugged her. Violet laughed. By August, Violet spoke clearly. She thanked them. She told Raymond he was her best friend. She told her mother she loved her. The Saturdays continued. Violet chose when to speak. In October, she asked Trevor how he knew she wasn't broken. "Because my son taught me that silence isn't absence." In December, Violet asked to go to school with Raymond. By spring, she had found her place. One afternoon, building a birdhouse, Violet asked if her father would be proud. Trevor said yes. Carolyn said she wasn't forgetting him. She was growing beyond the loss. And together, in the quiet hum of sawdust and wood, Violet kept building her voice, on her own terms. After that afternoon with the birdhouse, something settled inside Violet. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like sawdust slowly falling to the floor after the last cut is made. She didn't suddenly become a talkative child. Some days, words came easily. Other days, she chose silence again. But the difference now was simple and profound. Silence was no longer a prison. It was a choice. The workshop table they had built together became her favorite place in the house. It was the first space that felt like it truly belonged to her. Carolyn stopped filling Violet's days with appointments and experts. Instead, she filled them with time. Time sanding wood beside her daughter. Time listening without correcting. Time learning how to sit in quiet without trying to fix it. At school, Violet struggled at first. Some children asked questions she didn't know how to answer. On those days, she stayed close to Raymond. He never spoke for her unless she nodded first. When words felt too heavy, Violet would take out a small notebook and draw. Her teachers learned quickly that her drawings were not avoidance, they were communication. Slowly, the other children learned too. One afternoon, a classmate asked why Violet always carried a pencil instead of a toy. Violet thought for a long moment before answering softly, "Because pencils don't rush me." The teacher wrote that sentence down and taped it above her desk. At home, the rabbit still slept beside Violet every night. No one tried to take it away anymore. One evening, while Carolyn was folding laundry, Violet appeared in the doorway holding the rabbit carefully. "Mom," she said, her voice steady but quiet, "can we make her a box?" Carolyn froze for a second, then smiled. "A safe one," Violet added, "with soft edges." They built it together the next weekend, lining it with fabric and sanding every corner smooth. Trevor never became just a carpenter in Violet's life. He became something steadier, a reminder that broken things could still be useful, that silence could still be full. Raymond, too, grew alongside her. Where he once carried his grief like something sharp, it softened as he watched Violet find her way through hers. Years passed gently. Violet's voice grew stronger, but she never lost her comfort with quiet. She learned that she didn't owe anyone constant explanation. She learned that speaking mattered, but so did listening. When she was older, she started designing things on paper before building them. Tables, shelves, small boxes with hidden compartments. Carolyn framed her sketches instead of report cards. On the anniversary of her father's death, Violet chose silence again. She spent the day in the workshop, sanding a piece of wood until it was perfectly smooth. That evening, she placed it on the shelf beside the rabbit's box. Carolyn didn't ask questions. She simply sat beside her daughter, their shoulders touching, sharing the quiet. One night, much later, Violet said, "I think my dad would like the workshop." Trevor nodded. "I think he'd be proud you built it." Violet smiled, not because she needed reassurance anymore, but because she believed it herself. The Bradford house changed over time. It became less of a monument and more of a home. The east wing smelled permanently of wood and oil. Laughter echoed there now, mixed with long stretches of peaceful silence. And in that space, Violet grew, not into someone louder, but into someone whole. She never stopped building, and she never stopped choosing her voice, whether spoken or unspoken, on her own terms. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more heart-touching stories.